The season hasn't even started and Wolverhampton Wanderers have a problem. It's a major issue that could have devastating effects on their season to come. In fact, this problem is so catastrophic that the knock-on effect that could happen later on in the season could reverberate and really put into jeopardy Wolverhampton Wanderers' Premier League survival. And if you're a Wolves fan, it's going to have you concerned as to what the season may hold before a Premier League football is even kicked. Today we dive into the problem and actually discuss what is going on at Wolverhampton Wanderers and what knock-on effects could occur for the side going forwards, including whether their manager might walk away. If you are new to the channel, please make sure that you subscribe, you like the video, and you turn on notifications. But now, let's discuss the problem with Wolverhampton Wanderers. Okay, so let's dive right into it. What actually is the problem? Well, to put it plainly, Wolverhampton Wanderers don't have any money. In fact, to be a little bit more specific, they are definitely dancing around financial fair play guidelines. It has left them in a position where it looks like they're going to have to sell more of their top assets and then still not be able to bring anybody into the club. This all stems from an exclusive interview that Wolves manager Julen Lopetegui did with reporter Guillaume Balaguer. Now, I like Guillaume, and to be honest with you, I think he's one of the good ones, and the platform that he gave Lopetegui, I think, really helps to understand the situation that's going on at Wolves. Let's park the issue as to whether Lopetegui should have taken this interview in the first place from the club point of view and actually think about what he said. It was a pretty thoughtful interview where Lopetegui essentially outlines his frustration and his thought process going into the new season without major new signings or major new additions, signings that he feels like Wolves should be making to be able to keep them competitive in the Premier League. The general gist of it is he feels like Wolves cannot be competitive without some major additions going into next season, the same additions that every other team in the league is making. He spoke of the relegation battle that Wolves were in last season being either a big wake-up call for the entire club or something that might cause them more problems later down the line. And from what he said throughout the interview, it sounds like he believes it's going to be the latter. You see, to really understand it, we need to think back to when Julen Lopetegui actually arrived at Wolverhampton Wanderers. He claimed that the discussions they had before he joined the club were about ambition, the willingness to go and creep up into the top half of the table and eventually contest for places in Europe. However, following the end of the season, meetings took place around the transfer budget, and it turns out there isn't any. The financial investment into Wolverhampton Wanderers has now come around to bite them, and it turns out that 3-year cycle is now up, which means they need to balance the books to be able to go forwards. And in balancing the books, they need to sell. What's more is that Lopetegui wasn't told any of this until May. He explained that Wolves had a plan A, plan B to be able to work on in the transfer window, but it became apparent extremely quickly that plan A was never going to be an option. And it was a short period of time later that meant that plan B wasn't going to be an option either. And what does plan C look like? Well, I'm not sure he knows. He spoke extremely well in the interview, and if you're a Wolves fan and you haven't seen it, I implore you to go and watch it. It was something that was different from general other manager interviews. I'll leave a link in the description to the video because I do think it's important that people go watch it. He seemed more disappointed than anything else. And the fact of the matter is the club have not been honest with him going forward. And it gets worse. He's looking to rebuild the squad and he doesn't really have a say in player sales or the incoming of players. He claimed he worked on a transfer list with the recruitment team to be able to bring quality players in, and it just turned out it wasn't possible. And to top that cake off with a lovely cherry, he says that players are being sold now without his knowledge. Raul Jimenez, for example, he planned to have Jimenez in his squad going into next season, and then he had a phone call saying that Jimenez had been sold. And Daniel Pedence hasn't even gone on the preseason tour on the basis that the club are now looking to sell him as well. Now, regardless of your financial situation and how badly you need to sell players or get players off the books, communication is key with your manager, especially when you're going to be giving him limited resources to be able to work into next season. It just seems like to me, from an outsider looking in, something is seriously broken here. And during the interview, Lopetegui was asked a pretty straightforward question. What are the aims this season? And it's pretty telling when his response was nothing. He couldn't say anything. And if your manager is going into a new season like that, it's a pretty dire situation. Look, at the end of the day, I'm not blaming Wolves for selling their players. That's really not what I'm getting at. But when you bring in a manager like Lopetegui with that pedigree, with that progression, with that ambition to do better, I feel like you owe him a little bit more than to sell players behind his back and not communicate with him. Okay, so let's go back to one of the main problems that Lopetegui might have created himself. Should he really have done this interview? And the answer to that is a pretty resounding no. How are you helping the club in this current situation by complaining about the real problems going on behind the scenes? That being said, I do think there was part of this interview that came from the heart. He seems like a manager that's frustrated with the lack of ambition going forwards from a club that promised him so much. Don't get it twisted. Lopetegui is one of the best managers in the world currently. He has ambition, he has drive, he has determination, and if the club are not matching that, then it wouldn't surprise me if things start to change pretty quick. Like I said, he has drive and he has ambition. He's won Europa League titles. He's achieved a lot in his career. And if you think he's going to stick around while the club mess him about, you're going to be in for a shock. This clearly is going to become a clash of two moving parts, perhaps going in opposite directions. One is consolidating, whereas the other wants ambition to be able to drive forwards. Neither are wrong in this situation, I might add, but something has seriously been lost in the communication down the line. It's all good saying that you have all this ambition, and you have all this drive, and you have all this want and need to go forwards, but you need to deliver on that later on. Lopetegui went back to them after completing the mission that he was given. He kept them in the Premier League, and now he wanted to drive forwards to be able to take Wolves back up into the higher echelons in the Premier League where they claimed they wanted to be. And it seems like they have different ideas. Max Kilman looks like he's going to be the subject of yet another bid from a club outside of the Premier League, and Lopetegui indicated that he expects at least 2 or 3 more players to be sold before the start of the season. Now, if those are players that you're expecting to work with, and especially if you're not going to be given a transfer budget to be able to go forwards, what are you meant to do in that situation? It seems like all of this is going to be heading towards a conclusion that isn't going to be pretty, one that I fear Lopetegui might walk away from. And at the end of the day, the main people who are going to be hurt by this are the fans. The fans who just want to watch their team play good football, win football games and climb higher up the table. And the watching of those games is going to be a little bit more difficult, especially when you consider the fact that they're being asked to pay even more money after ticket prices were raised following a season of battling relegation. Yeah, that seems like a sensible thing. Near relegation equals raising of ticket prices. The more I read into it, the less of a positive spin I can try and put on it. But I will end with this. Lopetegui is still at the club and he is still a great coach. More time with the team and more time creating tactics to be able to help them get better can only mean better football. And if that interview was anything, it was a rallying cry to the fans to say that yes, it's going to be tough, but your support is going to be needed more than ever. And at the end of the day, that's what being a football supporter is all about, isn't it? Going through thick and thin to support your team. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below on everything we've spoken about today and how you believe Wolves will do next season. As always, thank you ever so much for watching. Please make sure you subscribe, you like the video and turn on notifications. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.